Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigeria. Good morning, Nigerians. Good morning, viewers, and compliment of the season from the FRS. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
That's a tax man wishing you all the very best for the season. Let's also welcome Mrs. Lovett Ononuga, Acting Director of VAT, that's Value Added Tax at the FRS. Mrs. Ononuga, we're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
I'm so glad to be here. Yes.
Okay.
Also here in the studio is Olatunji Olabode, Acting Head, Tax Policy and Advisory, Department of FRS. Good to have you.
Thank you, madam. Good morning, everyone. Nigerians, good morning.
And also to let you know that we have Abdulaziz Zalaya, Digital Innovation Support Group, FRS. You're all welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigerians. Good morning, everyone.
Okay, so, madam and gentlemen, let's begin this conversation. There seems to be, in my head, some slight confusion as to what we're dealing with. Are we dealing with VAT or we are dealing with withholding tax? Because I hear withholding VAT. And then, because VAT and withholding tax, they're not synonymous, are they?
No, absolutely not. There are two different taxes.
Yes.
So the withholding tax is actually an advance payment on your corporate income tax, whereas the VAT, which is the VAT for short, is value added tax, which is a totally different tax paid on purchases and services rendered.
So, what is the essence of the appointment of these collecting agents? Is it for withholding tax or is for VAT collection?
So the appointment is to collect VAT, that is value added tax, from vendors, suppliers, and contractors. So you know, as we are aware, that by law, everyone who engages in the purchase or transactions for purchase of goods and services is expected to remit the VAT charge and collect and remit the VAT due on those goods and services. But the difference with the withheld VAT is that whereas as a taxable person, you have an obligation to account for the VAT that you generate from your own business activities when you sell goods or services or render services. You also now have an additional obligation by disappointment to withhold the VAT that you should have paid on goods that you consume. So your suppliers, when they sell to you, they usually would invoice you for VAT on what they're selling to you as a company. And therefore now, whereas before you pay that VAT to your supplier, now the difference is that you withhold the VAT and then remit it yourself to the FRS.
Right.
So that's what is the withhold.
Thank you, Mrs. Lovett, for that explanation. But I don't think it's still, very clear, because in my mind, the issue of double taxation will not come into play in this particular regime that you're trying to start in January. But before you answer that, I'm talking to you, Sunday Okewo, the Director of Special Tax Audit. Could you tell us why just these entities? I hear that it's just NTA and Airtel and some banks. What is the criteria for choosing the collecting agents, like you call them? And then would it not lead to multiple taxation? Would this really be good for our economy at this point?
All right. Thank you, Madam, for the question. And thanks also to Lovett for having shed light on the initial question. VAT, like she said, is a tax on transactions. That is when persons consume services or purchase goods. We call it a consumption tax. And when you do that, the rule is that the service provider or the one that has made the sales is going to be charging you the percentage, which as of today is 7.5% on top of the cost of the items or the service that was rendered. So if that service provider or the seller of the goods or product is a Nigerian entity, you are by law, that is the consumer, to pay that VAT to the person. That is the service provider or the one who has sold the goods. So that person will collect the VAT from you and remit to the FRS within the designated period of time. As of today, is 21 days after the month of that transaction. That is, if the transaction took place in November, not later than 21st of December, the one who has rendered the service is obligated to return what he has collected to the service. If you look at VAT, it is also a multi-stage kind of tax. Multi-stage in the sense that the one who has rendered the service or who have sold the goods must have also incurred certain expenses for him to be able to provide or render that service. Take example of a wholesaler who sells consumer goods. He must have purchased from the manufacturer. The manufacturer has also charged them input. So when he is making his own returns, he would deduct the tax that he paid, that is the VAT that he has paid to the manufacturer, from the VAT that he has collected from his own customers. So the net is what will be remitted to the FRS. So that probably will answer the question on whether there will be multiple taxation or not in one aspect. Because if you are standing as the wholesaler, you collect VAT from your customer who may be a retailer or who may also be an end-time consumer. But the entirety of what you have collected is not what is going to come to the FRS, because the law recognizes that you must have also made your purchases from the manufacturer, and the manufacturer has also charged you VAT. So it is a plus and minus. What have you collected? I've collected 10,000. How much did you pay when you were acquiring the goods that you are selling? 7,500, for example. So the net, which is 2,500, becomes what that person is going to remit. Meanwhile, the manufacturer will have also done the same thing. What he has charged, 7,500, deducted what he has paid for all the raw materials and whatever that had been consumed in the process of production. So that will have been done. Now, if you now come back to the question of double taxation, VAT is a separate tax in its entirety. Withholding tax is also a separate tax in its entirety. Withholding tax is tied to the company income tax, and that's why she said it's an advanced form of taxation. When you pay withholding tax, when it was, as the transaction occurs, that will be paying withholding tax. At the end of your financial year, if you are a limited liability company, you will need to file the returns of your activity and decide and determine the amount of income tax that you are liable to pay by law. So when you finish, you now come up with the amount of withholding taxes that you had suffered, and you make that as a deduction. You use that value to reduce the amount of your taxes. That is withholding tax. But the issue of withholding VAT that we are speaking to this morning is arising because the law also mandates the FIRS. Section 14, subsection 3, as we have listened to in our intro, says that the service may appoint any person to withhold. Now, if you go back to the example of the wholesaler that I used, the wholesaler is supposed to have collected from his customer and be the one to come and remit to the FRS. But now the service says that in certain instances, when an agent has been appointed, you will not pay that VAT to the wholesaler. Come and pay directly to us. So what you pay to the wholesaler, the service says, pay directly to me. That is the role that MTN, Airtel, and the deposit money banks that have been so appointed are to be playing now. They have a number of vendors, a number of contractors, a number of suppliers who render services to them, who ordinarily, when they are MTN and the likes have received such services, they will pay the VAT to those suppliers, and those suppliers are now supposed to come and remit to the FRS. So, but these ones that have been appointed are big players. They have a large number of such clients. So we say to them, rather than your clients coming one after the other, you serve as a middle point, as a collecting point. Collect, don't pay them, come and pay directly to us. So as they are paying to us, their suppliers, their vendors will not need to come and pay what MTN, the deposit money banks, and Airtel had already paid to us. So the issue of double taxation would therefore not arise. I hope I answer your question.
Okay, thank you. I think the more we speak to these issues, the clearer it will become for our viewers. But was it just a lack of substitute nomenclature that we are also talking about withholding VAT? Because if there is a distinction between VAT, that's value added tax, and withholding tax, then why are we still referring, or why has the FRS decided to talk about VAT withholding agents and so on and so forth? Couldn't you look for a better word so that the confusion doesn't arise, whether you are dealing with withholding tax or VAT? I don't know whether you get my question. I'm speaking to Mr. Olatunji Olabode to say if VAT is a distinct taxation from withholding tax. That's clear from your explanation. But the role of these agents, you classify the agents as withholding tax agents or withholding VAT agents. Couldn't we look for another nomenclature for that withholding, another synonym?
Well, thank you for that question. And I appreciate my colleagues that have spoken earlier. VAT by operation, we have what you call output VAT and input VAT. My colleagues shed light to the implication of the suppliers, the so-called vendors to these appointed agents when it comes to rendering the returns. You observe that you will agree with me that some of these suppliers to those appointed agents are one-horse suppliers. Perhaps some of them are just entering the business the first time. The supply they made could be a one-off supply, and it could be a burden, say to say, for them to be coming one by one to render returns for just one supply. So the service designed this system in such a way that it will ease tax paying for our customers who happen to be the taxpayers. So withholding, we call it withholding VAT, in order to make it clearer that those that are supplying to the agents, the appointed agents, are not supposed to bother themselves coming to FRS to render. We want to change over by the person that's supposed to pay them that VAT for them to render to FRS are holding on to it so that they will not be bothered or they won't incur additional expenses in making the payment. Aside that, the appointed agents have the capacity. Some of them are technologically based. So paying tax wouldn't be a problem for them. Rendering returns wouldn't be an issue for them. So, and that accounts for the reason why we choose those few agents for now. We're likely to extend it to other sectors of the economy, but for now, we are focusing on MTN, Airtel, and bonding deposit, but because of the capacity we have seen in them, as well as their level of compliance.
All right, Dr. Olatunji, thank you so much. You would, expand this regime in the coming days, right? Once your kickstart in January, that's good. But I want to ask Abdulaziz Alaya, this regime, this issue of having some companies collect the tax and remit to FRS. Is there an issue of lack of trust, of the FRS? Maybe you think that these companies or entities who deal with these companies would not actually remit. So you now want these organizations that you can hold and say, okay, where's the tax? Is that why this policy is in place? Is it the issue of lack of trust? And then what is the main objective of this withholding tax regime and the issue of having collecting agents?
Okay, thank you for the question. And we talked about, is it a lack of trust between the FIRS and the taxpayers? I'll say no. And one of the reasons why this came on board is, one, to improve compliance, two, to also reduce the cost of compliance and the cost of collection as well. What do I mean? Like Mr. Okiowo rightly said earlier, MTN, Airtel, and the money deposit banks, they deal with a whole lot of customers who are by law also expected to file their VAT on a monthly basis. Because the law provides that whatever services that you provide or whatever goods that you sold, you are expected to charge VAT on it. And like we said as well, we have the input and output mechanism. Now, the output is what you collect, while the input is what you incurred while you were purchasing your home. Now, assuming a MTN, for example, has 10,000 vendors that provide services for them. Now, instead, ordinarily, the 10,000 vendors, when they do business with MTN, are supposed to charge MTN the VAT. When they collect, they deduct their own input VAT from it. Then they remit the rest. Now, we're now saying, instead of the 10,000 coming to remit that VAT, let's have the MTN, who is ordinarily supposed to pay these 10,000 people, to deduct that VAT that is supposed to be paid to them and remit to the FIRS. Now, that does not in any way exclude the 10,000 vendors from filing their own returns as well. But it brings more efficiency into it. Because obviously, out of the 10,000, you may have, say, 20% of them will not comply as at when due. And this as well also brings money to the government. Now, assuming MTN pays the 10,000, and 8,000 of them comes to file and pay the necessary VAT. So we are left with 2,000, who will likely have to still be going after for compliance purposes. However, the MTN has deducted this, is supposed to pay this 10,000, MTN is now paying it directly to FIRS. So that is giving money to government. You see that in the last few months, we report at the FAC meeting, they report the VAT collected. And you could always see the increment in the value-added tax that is collected.
Okay, from the abstract level, let's bring it down to reality, Mrs. Ononuga, because you're talking about input and output, mentioning MTN, Airtel, and then money deposit banks. These don't, in general, these are services that they render. Services. So what is the input? How does it work? And what is the output? How does that affect an individual? Or are these just mere business transactions that the individual customer doesn't need to worry his head about?
Okay. So thank you very much for that question. And thanks to my colleagues who have also expanded on this issue of the input-output mechanism of VAT. That ensures that it's a multi-stage tax, but the input is actually chargeable on only goods and not services. If you offer services, you are not actually entitled to claim an input VAT because there is nothing you're putting into the creation of that service. So the law allows for input VAT to be claimed on when you are producing goods. You understand? So for the MTN and Airtel that we've just recently, and money deposit banks which we have just recently appointed, they are the VAT is the output VAT we're talking about here mostly. They may incur some level of input if they sell hardware, which is regarded as a good, but it's not as much as when you are into manufacturing. When you are into manufacturing, you are actually buying a raw material and then creating a good. So if you have, for instance, you manufacture handbags or make jewelry, you buy the raw gold and then you turn it into jewelry and then you sell, so you are allowed input and on that good that you have manufactured. Same thing with a handbag. If you're buying the raw leather and then producing the handbag in the factory and then reselling, so that's where the difference is basically.
I'm sorry. This is still not clear. Okay. I mean, maybe Mr. Okewo may also weigh in here. What then is your rationale? Because we're talking about services, and then the input factor is limited, and then the output factor probably is more dominant. So is your focus on services, the collection of VAT on services, or the entire spectrum? You understand what I'm saying? Just for the benefit of our viewers, let's have the clarification to say, look, why have you appointed MTN or Airtel or even money deposit banks? In fact, when I heard money deposit banks, my mind just went to say, look, somebody has a fixed deposit at maturity. If it has yielded interest, then of course on that interest there's a withholding tax on it, but which is not the issue we are dealing with now. We are dealing with VAT. So your normal banking transaction, your normal MTN, you buy your data. How does this come about?
All right, thank you. Very good question, and also very good responses that have been provided by Lovett. Let me just say clearly that what the new policy has no direct effect on customers of any bank. Neither does it have any direct effect on customers of the telecoms. It's not going to lead to a price increase. It's not going to lead to a tariff raise or whatever, except those organizations intend to raise their prices ab initio, which is within their prerogative. So that has nothing to do with that. But the point that we are stressing, like Abdulaziz said, is compliance will get better. And that is the main thing that the FRS is set to achieve. We trust all our taxpayers, and that is why the tax system is structured around the self-assessment regime. What that means is determine by yourself the amount of taxes that you ought to pay, the amount of taxes that is due from you by law, and come and remit. That is the basis of the tax system largely. But in order to make things better, the law has empowered the FRS to be able to appoint people or persons who could be of assistance in the compliance process. And that is where the MTN, the Airtel, and the money deposit banks stands. So for the banks, the amount of deductions that they will be deducting will not be coming from their customers. Take any bank, for example, without having to mention names. They have people who does a whole lot of things for them, like service providers to them. People does their repairs and maintenances that they will pay. People does the cleaning of the banks that they will pay. People does constructions of their offices, and so on and so forth. It's endless. They buy computers, they buy generator, and all of those. So all of those services are liable to VAT. So everyone who renders such services to the banks will invoice them for the value of the work done, and will also add a 7.5% VAT on top of it. Mm-hmm. So with the current system that we practice, Bank A, for example, when it receives that invoice, will pay the value of the service charged by the service provider, and will also pay the VAT to that service provider. Then the service provider has the obligation to bring the 7.5 to the FIRS. And they are in their numbers. You can imagine how many they could be. So the table is now being turned. We have seen the banks. You have very large vendors, service providers, suppliers. Ditto for all of these other entities that have been so appointed. Okay, it's going to help compliance because not all of the vendors are indeed feasible. I think it was Olabode who mentioned that some might be doing just a one-off transaction. He does it, and after the end of the contract, you cannot get him again. Meanwhile, he's been paid the VAT, which is government money. He has taken his own, the one that he has collected on behalf of the government. You begin to have to put in extra effort to look for him. So you, who is the payer, as you raise your one check for the supplier, you are raising also the check for the FIRS. So if you like, monthly basis, you can collect everything together and you remit to the service. So it has nothing to do with the end customers at all.
All right, thank you, Sunday Ukewo, Director of Special Tax Audit FIRS. I think my next question will now be to Dr. Olatunji. Mr. Sunday has made it really very simple, what this regime is all about. But we are Nigerians, and in Nigeria, people find a way to, always bypass the system. I mean, the new Naira was released some days ago, but we're already hearing of counterfeits. So, as you're coming up with this idea, of course, these companies are also looking for ways to invade the FIRS. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Now, you're starting with just the money banks, MTN and Airtel. Some other sectors are not a part of it. Now, look at this scenario. A company who renders service to, say, MTN, and then to another company that is not listed as an agent for this tax. He said that same company is still supposed to, come to FIRS and say, this is what we did and all of that. Is it not possible that such companies may just come up to say that all we did, for this period is with only those agents that you have appointed and they have collected the tax. So I have nothing else to remit to you since you are not yet in some other sectors at the moment. So as you answer that question, what are the offenses under withholding VAT system? And then what are the punishments stipulated in the VAT Act?
Thank you very much for the question. The Value Added Tax Act, as well as other enactments of Nigeria, especially FR Establishment Act, specify penalties and interest to be applied on offenders. This penalty ranges from absolute figure to relative figures, as well as imprisonment. So, for instance, if you fail to render to remit what you have collected, the value-added tax put in place 10% as the penalty, in addition to the tax you're supposed to pay. And as well, if you are found guilty of evading the tax, the court of law can place imprisonment of 3 years on you. So this is one of the penalties available. So you can even have you can also be made to bar, just like we have not appoint some of the taxpayers. You can also be made to not to be a party to those people to be appointed as agents of collection.
Okay, but how would you find out?
Okay.
The scenario I painted. How would you find out that a company did not only deal with only the collecting agents that you have, that they have also dealt with some other companies that are not listed right now as your collecting agent? How would you be able to find out and be able to get the tax they're supposed to pay? Such that they're not shortchanging government like he said.
Yes, FRS put in place technology. We have an office mining data, analyzing the data of taxpayers. So we have opportunity with that analysis we are doing to detect some of the tax evaders. So once we get hold of you, definitely the law will catch up with that person.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Olatunji Olabode. Let's bring in again Abdulaziz Alaya. There were issues sometime in the past with regard to non-remittance of VAT collected by a broad range of businesses. How does the appointment of these new agents help ameliorate or mitigate against earlier reports of non-remittance? Because it appears that this is just a small slice of the business world in Nigeria that is covered by the appointment of these collecting agents.
Okay. We're talking about people who are ordinarily not been remitting before now, right? Did I get it correctly?
Yes.
All right, that's fine. So, like I said earlier, on the issue of compliance, in fact, this will bring to fore some of those companies who have been dealing with these big corporations that have now been appointed. It will bring them forward because, assuming I am XYZ Limited, and over times I've been doing business with MTN or with Airtel or with any of the money deposit banks, and I have not been complying with the monthly value-added tax filing of my returns. It simply mean that when the new appointees, instead of paying the VAT to you, when they come to remit, because just like Dr. Olabode said earlier, we have technology and we also have the Tax Pro Max system, which every taxpayer now uses in filing their returns. Now, when the Airtel files their returns, the returns comes with a schedule. And these schedules have the details of every taxpayer that they have dealt with. So say, for example, I am one of the money deposit banks that have so been appointed for the VAT, and I'm remitting, say, for example, 1 billion naira this month. And out of that 1 billion, I have 5,000 taxpayers that I have dealt with. And out of these 5,000, we have about, say, 200 of them who have actually not been remitting. Now, I am going to be providing their details with their tax identification number, their TIN, and the description of the services they have provided for me, including the amount that is involved. So that gives FIRS an information that, okay, if we want to even look at, by the time we're doing our own review, we'll look at the number of taxpayers that have so been submitted by these new agents vis-a-vis the tax compliance records of those taxpayers who they are dealing with.
Sorry, let this not sound like some rocket science. One knows that companies also have their VAT identification number or otherwise to say that, yes, that just to say that you are entitled to collect VAT or to charge VAT on your goods or on your services. So that it's now 7.5%. If you issue an invoice to a client, you put the cost of the business or the service or the good, and then the VAT, and then of course your VAT number, your VAT collection number means that you are genuine. Now, that's why I'm asking the question. There are a number of businesses and number of numbers that you have. I don't know what the number is that you have issued for persons who are entitled to collect VAT. Take a simple example. You go to a supermarket, you go to a mall, and some of these big shops and so on and so forth. By the time you get to the register and they are tallying up your purchase, at the end of it, you have a VAT. A VAT factor is there, 7.5%. You get it. Now, but these persons have not been named. That's why when you say Airtel, MTN, money deposit banks, they are not the same as some of these supermarkets or malls that businesses go on round the clock. I mean, when you mentioned Airtel and MTN, what comes to my mind, I don't know whether that's part of it, they have a number of base stations all over the place. And these base stations have to be serviced. People will supply them diesel, for instance, and other ancillary services. So how does this impact on the efficiency of collection system-wide, rather than to these specific entities that are now to be withholding VAT collection?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I'm just going to try to be as use very, very layman expressions to try and explain this, how it works. Sometimes we are taxmen, so sometimes when we speak tax, and it may be a bit confusing for the layman. So, but let me just explain it the way it works. The reason why we have chosen Airtel, MTN, and the money deposit banks, by the way, this is not new to FRS or to the Nigerian tax system. Section 13 already has enshrined in it that all oil and gas companies operating in the oil and gas space, they also are required to withhold VAT from their suppliers and to remit to the service as well. All MDAs, that's all government ministries, departments, and agencies, are also by law expected to withhold VAT from their contractors and suppliers and remit to FRS. So it's not new. So Section 14 is what actually gives FRS the power to appoint any other person as an agent of VAT collection. So which is what we have exercised now. We have exercised the power and appointed these companies. There is no, it doesn't mean that we are not going to appoint more companies. We might still appoint more companies. We're working through it. This is the beginning, and the reason we've done it, just like my colleagues have all explained, is because of one, efficiency. Two, to help improve, to reduce cost of collection. How does it do that? Because when you have one person with 1,000, 2,000, or 10,000 suppliers to just that one client, and then you now centralize the collection of VAT by that one person. Now, that one person is also expected, when they file, they will supply the TIN numbers, just like you said, of all their suppliers, which now means that all these other suppliers and contractors become very visible to the tax administration's system. So on our systems, because we have deployed technology, all filing of VAT is now done on one platform, and that is called the Tax Promax, which is the Nigerian FRS tax administration system. So that one system, every taxpayer in Nigeria is supposed to do their filing on that one system. So we have visibility using that technology on all taxpayers who file. Now imagine what will happen if one deposit bank or one MTN with all their suppliers and vendors that they have nationwide now files and uploads a schedule of all their suppliers to the FRS, indicating their TIN numbers, their business name, and addresses. So that means that all these suppliers now become visible to the tax administration. If they were not filing before, then it becomes obvious that there is a gap, because we can go back on the system and see their tax record. But if they were filing, then we also see if there are any lapses, we're able to see it. So the system is like a self-auditing system. The Tax Promax is a self-auditing system that allows the FRS visibility on all her taxpayers who are supposed to be filing, and sees immediately anyone who has not filed.
And underlining factor here is trust on the collecting agency or the collecting agent to render full disclosure of transactions with suppliers. Is that correct? And if that is so, I don't mean to disrespect the agents that have been appointed, but speaking generally, we do know, for instance, that some businesses prepare a number of different books, different accounts. And so in some of those accounts, what will lead to the balance sheet could be a non-disclosure of some transactions and so on and so forth. How do you account for this, Mr. Okwewu?
All right, thank you. And I take it from where you stop. The agents, we trust them. Not only them, we also trust other taxpayers. But like the co-anchor has asked before, people will also want to cut corners. That is normal when it comes to issues of taxation. And that speaks to what Lopet was saying, that with technology, we are much better now to be able to see things, much more earlier and much more clearly. And what that means is, as FIRS, when you have rendered a service and you collect VAT, you render to us. And the VAT that you have collected, which is output to you, output tax, which Olabode was also speaking to the other time, is input to another company. So the man who has done the output will render returns that I have issued invoices to these companies. Is going to be on the system, because those output becomes input to another taxpayer. So it comes also to come and make those claims. So the system would be talking to system now. You have filed your output, which I know is somebody's input. The system is already matching it. So if you are making a claim for an input and somebody who's supposed to have declared that as output has refused to declare it, the system is going to issue an exception report that I have received this, your claim, but come on, Mr. A, who ought to have rendered this return, has not rendered. So by the time the system is not able to knock that claim against what has come in, it becomes an issue for investigation or for audit. So on the part of the agent, yes, they have good records, track records. And part of what we have also put on the table is that the money to be so withheld from the vendors, they are not free fund for anybody to want to play any game with. Why? Because you who has been appointed the agent, you are going to be making your returns to us. And the vendors that has also suffered that deduction that you ought to have paid, and we said, don't pay them, come and pay us, will also come and render returns to us. So if the agent has submitted his own returns, is going to give us a schedule. That schedule will give us the list of all the vendors every month, from whose invoices they have deducted VAT or withheld VAT and remitted to us. Individually, all of the vendors also will file their own returns and will say, take for example, MTN, I am vendor A, I am on the list or the schedule submitted by MTN or Airtel or any of the banks. And the agent has said that from vendor A, I have deducted 1 million naira. Vendor A in his own return will come to tell me how much was deducted by the agent from his vendor. So system, talking to system, will fish it out if there is any anomaly. Why would the agent say you have withheld 2 million and you are reporting 1 million?
The reason I ask this is we have experience in this jurisdiction, for instance, with check-off dues. Companies will collect check-off dues. This is for union purposes. Collect check-off dues or not remit. We also have problems, and it's been raised in the past, with payee. That's pay as you earn, which is personal income tax. Some companies, private companies, will deduct payee and then not remit to the authority. That's why I'm raising this question, to say that, okay, you may be dealing with a smaller group now, but where you have a plenitude of taxpayers and of collecting authorities, then the challenge probably is likely to multiply. So you want to speak to this issue I raised now about pay. There were challenges with that in the past, as well as check-off dues, which is not necessarily your issue. But pay, personal income tax, they would deduct it and then not remit.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know that has been happening. That happened in the past when the system was largely manual. And in terms of payee, FRS is not really the organization that per se collect payee. We only collect a few for the armed forces and also for officers in the foreign affairs who are on foreign mission. That these are the categories that we collect as the revenue agency of the federal government. But I do understand your perspective that somebody may withhold and keep the money and will not remit. Now, with automation, monitoring becomes easier for us because we cannot preempt what the agent will do. We only believe that they are indeed trustworthy and they will act in accordance with the mandate that has been given to them. Withhold and remit within specified number of days. Now, part of what we have also explained to them that business as usual, let's forget about it. It's not going to be so. Under the law, the executive chairman of the FRS has power to place a lien on the bank account of any person. So if you have collected and you delay your remittance, that power could be triggered. And a lien is placed on your account in order to collect that money because it is the money of the government. And that probably is one of the penalties or offenses how we are going to be dealing with it when somebody has contravened the law.
All right. Thank you so much, Sunday. Of course, we have many more questions for you as regards, this regime. But we'll quickly take a break now. When we come back, Good Morning Nigeria continues. Please stay.
I was a civil servant.
I'm a teacher by profession.
I trained as a nurse.
I could not even remember some of them, but by their approach, greeting, and respect.
I make beads. I liquid soap. I have stopped buying liquid soap from the market. I make it, and I teach these young ones how to do that. And when I do, it is not for any fee.
In most cases, I serve as consultants. Many people come to me inquiring how to go about doing the farming. I normally direct them on what to do.
Right now, I'm not into any paid job, as I said, but I'm happy doing what I'm doing.
Senior citizens over the years have shown that they are still capable of working. They have shown that retirement is only but a social construct, not a limitation. Senior citizens until the end carry around a wealth of knowledge that we can tap into. They have walked these journeys we now walk today. They have amassed all of these experiences so they can stand holding the torch so we do not stumble in the dark. Our senior citizens are national assets, packed full with inestimable value. They should not be condemned to a life of obscurity, but one where they serve to illuminate our path. Promoting senior citizens for intergenerational workforce.
To every politician, as the campaigns gain momentum and passions begin to rise, remember, the errors of your opponents do not make you a success. Do not run down your opponent and inflame passions to violence between and among your supporters. What counts is what you plan to do for the electorate and how you intend to relieve the sufferings and bring succor. Nigeria is in dire need of patriotic leaders at all levels, leaders who will make national development their priority. Concentrate on telling the electorate what you intend to do when you get into office. Focus on making your vision clear to the electorate. Don't engage in verbal abuses, fake news, or speeches. Keep dealing with issues that will bring progress. You win the hearts and minds of the people by being above board, by being civil, patriotic, and showing empathy. Let's join hands to make the 2023 elections peaceful. A message from the National Orientation Agency.
Nigerians, elections are here again. Let us shun violence. Let us play the game according to the rules. Do not be a thug. Say no to violence. Let's rise and defeat violence, crime, and sabotage against the peace of our nation. Nigeria is the only country we have. We must do everything to keep it united. We must avoid any act that promotes hate and disintegration. Say no to separatist movement, terrorism, fake news, hate speech, religious bigotry, and any act that tends to divide us as a nation. Watch out for strange gatherings and suspicious movements. Restrict access to sensitive documents and data, the disclosure of which may damage national security. Educate your staff and family, particularly on measures to safeguard information and report security breaches. Apply relevant legal security guidelines to protect yourself and your neighbors. Due to misinformation and wrong choices, some idle persons resort to vices in their greed to get rich quick. They resort to kidnapping, killings for rituals, and other heinous crimes. Avoid wrong use of the social media. Before you broadcast that false message, think twice. Ask whether it will promote peace or violence. For safety at home, still be security conscious. Educate your household on safety tips. Report all suspicious movements and persons to the security agencies nearest to you. Be a good citizen. Be patriotic. To pass security information, please call 0813-222-2105, 0915-339-1309, 0908-837-3514, or send a mail to dssPR@dss.gov.ng. This message is from the Department of State Services, DSS.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're discussing, of course, tax issues around the new services that will become operational from next year, and that is to say that some select companies, Airtel, MTN, and some of the money deposit banks will now act as collecting agents for value-added tax. Of course, this is more essentially in the realm of business-to-business transaction, but individuals, of course, run these businesses here, and at the end of the day, we've been told by our guests this morning that there will be no direct effect on the consumers of the services of these entities that have been appointed as collecting agents. I want to come back to Abdulaziz. Abdulaziz, what should be of concern to anyone who is involved in this process, and what should be the expectation?
Okay, the concerns for the agents that have now been appointed will be, for me personally, some of them will be looking at what will be involved in complying to these new assignments or new functions that has been given to them. For us on the FIRS, we have a platform called the Tax Roadmap, which has been mentioned, and they are expected to file returns. However, I feel what we may give them a bit of concern is they are expected to upload a schedule of all their vendors with the correct information of these vendors. At the beginning, it could be a bit cumbersome, considering the volume of vendors that they may have. However, subsequent filings will only require that they update some of these informations. If you have a vendor that deals with you on a regular basis, you will not need to be putting the name or the thing. It's only the first time. What may be changing is perhaps the amount that is involved in the transactions and the VAT chargeable on those. So we've made it so easier for the vendors to be able to do this. But the hiccup will be the first time doing this, because it means if I have 10,000 vendors, I have to populate the records of 10,000. Yes, it's we understand that it could be a bit of work for them, but we are sure that going forward, it's not going to be an issue.
All right, many thanks, Abdulaziz. I'll quickly go to Mrs. Loveth now. Sunday and Abdulaziz have mentioned the tax pro marks and all that. Could you please, explain to us clearly how a taxpayer is supposed to, get registered or file in that particular portal, because I hear it's an online portal. And from what has been said so far, the tax pro max is a game changer, because you get to see, what different companies are doing, the taxes the collecting agents are remitting, and, what the companies are also stating that they've remitted. So would this system help to check, people who may mistakenly, because of course nobody wants to pay tax in excess, but I think it's possible. Yeah, so would this system help to check that? And then is there a way to get a refund? Because of course Nigerians want to hear that. Sometimes you overpay, or things could happen when it comes to figures.
Absolutely.
So could you please explain that to us?
All right, thank you very much for that question. Very good question. I'd like to just try and explain, just to highlight the entire scenario, the picture from beginning to end. So we're talking about suppliers to Airtel, MTN, and money deposit banks. These, so for instance, take a bank. The bank has cleaners, a cleaning company offering services to the bank. So let's just look at just that one supplier of a service to the bank. Now, there may be several other suppliers doing different things for the bank. They are all taxpayers. The bank itself is a taxpayer, right? So when the bank is paying to the cleaning company that cleans its offices, or maintenance company that maintains its offices, or even prints checks for them, printing company, those are all suppliers to the banks, right? So they are all taxpayers, and when the bank is now paying them, the bank is required now to withhold the VAT, that portion, instead of paying it to the supplier, and then remit that. So when they go on tax promax, the first thing is, as an agent, an appointed agent, you have to, of course, you must be registered on tax promax. And then when you log in, you go to group taxes. That's a platform on there called group taxes, where you now select the withheld VAT, WVAT, and then you can now enter the details of the supplier that you're paying, that we have withheld from, and then you file. Then when it comes to the supplier of the service, that's the cleaning company or the printing company or the maintenance company which is supplying to the bank, they are also expected to file by the 21st day of the month all the VAT which was aggregated in the previous month. So the VAT aggregated in November, for instance, if they were paid by the bank or they did any service to the bank, that VAT, they're supposed to also file it by the 21st of, which is actually tomorrow. Tomorrow is the deadline for filing VAT accrued in November. So they are also supposed to have a login access on Tax Promax, login, and also go in and do their normal filing as they would. Now, they now have an opportunity to access the VAT that was withheld on their behalf and apply it. Then declare any other VAT that was not withheld, because they may have done services for a non-bank or outside another taxpayer that is not MTN or there's not an agent. So the VAT from those activities would not have been withheld. So if they supply to, let's say, NTA, well, NTA is probably not a good example, because NTA is a government agency, is actually expected to also withhold.
Okay.
So just another corporate company out there, doing business, ABC company, they supply cleaning services to them. Then the VAT that accrued from that, they're supposed to declare it on the tax roll when they log in and file normally. we say that those who withhold VAT on behalf of their vendors and suppliers should actually try and file by the 14th, so that credit can go to the accounts of the different suppliers. You understand? Then when they come to file by 21st, they will now be able to see their credit and account for it. So in the end, like I said earlier, the system is self-policing, allows us access to both the agents and also the vendors and suppliers who are doing business with these agents. Okay, so if you are an agent, a supplier or a vendor to any of these companies out there, how does it affect you? It affects you because you now know that when you go to on Tax Pro Max to do your filing, there is a credit waiting for you from the VAT that was supposed to have been paid to you and you remit, but has now been withheld by these agents. But if you do business with someone who is not an appointed agent, then you should understand that you still have to declare that VAT when you come to file.
And that was the question I asked earlier.
Yes.
So how do you now get to hold these companies?
Okay.
You know, because, you know, they could just tell you, well, we didn't do anything with any other company. Yeah. How would you be able to know and then be able to track that particular VAT on those services, you know, rendered to people who are not, or rather agencies or companies that are not a part of the collecting agent?
Okay. So to truly, like you have said, there is a compliance problem in Nigeria. There is a high compliance, but then many tax regimes in the world also struggle with a compliance problem. But in Nigeria, we have a compliance problem that FRS, over the years, we have been applying technology to try and reduce, to clamp down on it. One of the things that we've done is to introduce the VAT automation program. What is VAT automation? A tax system that deploys integrated technology to the taxpayer systems, you know, ERP systems, to actually aggregate the VAT from there, identify and aggregate the VAT from that they are generating from their businesses, and then remit that to the service. You know, so for instance, we have automated a number of retail shops, supermarkets, large supermarkets and large hotels, you know. So what happens is that when you go to buy from them, their VAT, because they are already integrated on the VAT automation program, their VAT is visible to the service. Okay, so this helps to curb that evasion. You know, basically they're evading the payment of the tax. You know, so evasion could happen in where you may fail to collect. If you fail to collect, the penalty is higher. 150% of whatever amount you fail to collect is added onto what you should have collected, and then plus interest on it, which is 5% above the CBN prevailing rate. Okay, if you collect and you fail to remit, at least we know that our money is with you, or the federal government's money is with you. So the penalty is about 10% of what you have collected and failed to remit, plus interest at CBN prevailing rate. Okay, so these are some of the measures. So the VAT automation helps to ensure that FRS has visibility on your business activity VAT that you are supposed to declare.
All right, with that explanation, does that mean, Sandy Okeowo, does that mean that companies should get tax advisors? Because, you know, I've heard a lot of experts say that when it comes to tax, you know, it's important that companies have, you know, tax advisors, you know, so that, you know, they can understand the process better. Because, again, the tax invasion sometimes is not really because they want to invade. They may not really be properly informed or did not know exactly what to do or how to go about it. So what would be your advice now, you know, to companies, you know, that render services, whether to these collecting agents or those who are not yet collecting agents, whatever, you know, what they should do as regards, you know, tax payments now with this new regime by the FRS? Because, I mean, the penalties are stiff so that they don't run foul.
Okay, thank you. Definitely the cost of compliance is cheaper than cost of non-compliance. And that is the point that we have been trying to address. I'm going to address that concern that we have raised. But there are two questions that were asked that I actually want to top up to what my colleagues have said. The first one, you have repeated it 2 times. How will the service know if a vendor, for example, with any of the telecoms, any of the appointed telecoms, does businesses with other persons or other entities who are not appointed as agent of VAT collection? I think that was the question.
Yes.
Yeah. Initially, I had explained the input and output mechanism of the value-added tax. That vendor that does businesses with the appointed telecoms and other non-appointed persons will issue each of them invoices and is going to charge VAT. I'd also explained that the MTN and the Airtel of this world, they will report what they have withheld. And the system is going to match that against what the vendor has declared. So that settles that. The other angle is, what about the services or supplies to those who have not been appointed agent by these vendors? And I also explained that what is output to the vendors is input to another person. So if the vendor who has collected that output, nobody will tell it. The vendor has collected the output. If he refuses to disclose, is indirectly inhibiting somebody from making his own input. But because he had issued the invoice, the man who owns the input will claim it on the same system. So the system receives a claim for input and is expecting where's this output? I should be able to tie them together. So if I can't tie it, what happens is he issues an exception report. Mr. A has made an input tax claim, which should have been rendered by Mrs. F. So the service is aware. With that exception, then we can beckon on Mr. F. We have information here. This is your invoice that you have yet to declare this your output. So that knocks them out. That is in addition to the history of the taxpayer that we already have before now. We know who your vendors are. We know who your customers are. So if you have told me you services this telecoms, that telecom, and these other persons previously. So if I don't see your returns reflecting that, it triggers a question. You understand? So another question that to ask you is regarding that what should be the concern, which Abdulaziz answered. The concern to the agent, there is additional responsibility. Their normal returns that they have been filing hitherto, they will still continue to file it. That is their own returns. But in addition to that, they have to also file the returns of their collections, what they have withheld on behalf of the FRS from their various vendors and suppliers. And that must be done accurately, because those vendors, those suppliers are also waiting.
What are the incentives for this additional responsibility being now by law imposed on these collection agents? Because I mean, you talk about technology, but it will require increased man hours to apply the technology to deal with the tens of thousands of suppliers and others who are paying tax. What are the incentives, if any?
Incentives to them or to the FRS now?
Incentive. You are imposing more duties on me as an agent. I should have an incentive.
Okay, maybe I will take that and take it with the question on the appointment of tax advisors that she asked me. Incentive to them, I think we must first see it as a service to our motherland. We are all Nigerians, and we are all eager to build an egalitarian society. Number 2 is that when you pay your vendors in November, or let's use next year, because the program starts from next year. You pay your vendors in the month of January. All the transactions, all of those payments to the vendors in the month of January, your remittances will come in February. So when you pay the vendors, for simplicity, you pay them 1,000 naira instead of 1,070 50 kobo, which will have been the 7.5%. So you pay the vendors 1,000 naira you are withholding 70.5. Multiply by 1 million, depending on the number of your vendors and suppliers. That cash is still with you. So they still have the benefit of holding those cash till maybe 14th date of the following month of February. Holding it in trust for the government. So, and you know, if it runs to millions and billions, if you take it to a bank, one day interest that the bank is going to pay you on that.
So why are you giving business to people who are already big in business? That's the question others would ask. You know, why people are already they're already rich, and then you are giving them more business. I understand your explanation, but of course there's also higher responsibility, because when you talk about patriotism and so on and so forth, the question is going to arise. You probably need more manpower, and you have to pay these persons to be sure that they go through your books. So. On that note, I think we have to thank our guests. It's a continuing conversation.
Of course.
But it's a fairly technical area, and I'm sure that going forward, you have the interactions with the agents and then smoothing whatever rough edges there are. And going forward, businesses will have a clearer understanding of these issues. Sunday Okewo, Director, Special Tax Audit of FIRS, would like to thank you for being our guest this morning. Also, Mrs. Lovett Ononuga, Acting Director of VAT of FIRS. In fact, all of our guests this morning are from the FIRS. Olatunji Olabode, Acting Head, Tax Policy and Advisory Department, and Abdulaziz Alaya, Digital Innovation Support Group. Madam and gentlemen, we appreciate you being our guest on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, let's go over now to our sports desk.